The stagecoach kicked up a cloud of dust that tasted like forgotten promises. It rattled into Timber Creek, a place that was more of an idea than a town, sketched out on the vast, unforgiving canvas of the 1875 Colorado Territory. Folks stopped what they were doing. The clang of the blacksmith's hammer went silent. Whispers started snaking through the dry air. A stagecoach on a Tuesday was strange, but the passenger it carried, she was something else entirely. A young woman, with eyes as empty as a dried-up well, stepped down onto the dusty main street. She looked like she'd been misplaced by the world, a porcelain doll left out in the sun too long. Vaughn Thornton watched from the shadow of his mercantile's awning. At 32, he'd seen his share of strange things blow into Timber Creek. But this woman, this felt different. This felt like trouble wearing a pretty blue dress. She stood there wobbling a little, next to a single scuffed trunk. Her dress was worn from the road, but you could tell it had been something fine once. Honey brown hair was pinned up, but strands had escaped, framing a face that was just lost. The stagecoach driver, a man in a hurry to be anywhere else, cleared his throat. "Madam, this is it. Timber Creek, end of the line for you." Her brow furrowed, a tiny ripple in a still pond. "Yes, thank you." "And who's meetin' you?" he pressed. Her hand, covered in a worn glove, went to her temple. A gesture of confusion. "I'm not entirely certain." The driver looked at the station manager. A look passed between them that said, "Not my problem." But Vaughn was already moving. He didn't know why. Part of it was his duty as a town council member. But another part, a deeper part he hadn't felt since the war, was pulling him toward her. He felt a need to stand between her and whatever was coming. "I can help with this," he said, his voice calm and steady as he reached the small group. "Vaughn Thornton. I own the mercantile." She turned to him, and he saw her eyes up close. They were the color of amber, like honey with the sun trapped inside. But they were clouded, fogged over with a deep, unsettling confusion. "Thank you, Mr. Thornton," she said, her voice a soft melody. She stopped. A flicker of sheer panic crossed her face, so fast you'd miss it if you weren't looking. "I believe my name is Tabitha. Tabitha James." The driver grunted. "Ticket says T. James, paid in advance from Denver, so I guess that fits." Vaughn's eyes narrowed. "You believe your name is Tabitha?" A blush colored her cheeks. "It's quite embarrassing. I seem to be having some trouble recalling certain details." The station manager snorted. "Sounds like trouble to me." "I'll handle it," Vaughn said, his tone leaving no room for argument. He looked at the driver. "Her trunk." After the stagecoach was nothing more than a dusty memory on the horizon, Vaughn led the woman to a bench. He needed to understand what he was dealing with. "Miss James," he started, trying to be gentle. "Are you telling me you don't remember why you've come to Timber Creek?" She pressed her hands together in her lap, a nervous little bird. "I remember getting on the coach in Denver. I remember being told I was expected here." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "But I don't know who expects me, or why." Vaughn stroked his jaw. This was getting stranger by the second. "Were you traveling alone?" "I believe so." She opened her small purse, her reticule, and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It looked worn, as if it had been opened and closed 100 times. "I found this. Maybe it explains something." He took the paper. The handwriting was elegant, precise. The note was short, almost cold. "Miss James, your passage to Timber Creek is arranged. Upon arrival on May 15th, you will be met. You will be escorted to your new home. Bring only what is necessary." It was signed with 2 words that sent a chill down Vaughn's spine. "Your future." "This doesn't tell us much," Vaughn said, frowning. He looked at her, really looked at her. "Do you remember anything else? A family? Where you lived before Denver?" She shook her head, frustration twisting her pretty features. "Only pieces. A boarding house in Denver. Before that, it's like a thick curtain. I can't see behind it." Just then, Sheriff Miles Parker came sauntering over, his boots kicking up little puffs of dust. "Everything all right here, Vaughn?" "Sheriff, this is Miss Tabitha James. She just arrived. Seems she's a little mixed up about her welcome party." The sheriff tipped his hat. A man who preferred simple problems, and this was not one of them. "Ma'am, any other luggage?" "No, sir, just the trunk." Sheriff Parker knelt by the trunk, his knees creaking. "Mind if I take a look? Might be a clue in there." Tabitha nodded, giving her permission. He lifted the heavy lid. Inside, it was all very modest. A few dresses, some undergarments, a brush. Nothing out of the ordinary, except for one thing. Tucked in a side pocket was a folded newspaper clipping. It was yellowed and brittle. Vaughn picked it out carefully, his fingers gentle. He unfolded it. His breath caught in his throat. It was an advertisement. A lonely rancher in the Colorado Territory seeking a mail-order bride. Encircled in dark ink, a location. Timber Creek. "Mail-order bride," the sheriff muttered, a low whistle escaping his lips. "Well, that explains it." Tabitha's face went white as a sheet. I'm here to be married." Vaughn nodded slowly, his mind racing. "It seems so. The question is, to whom?" The sheriff scratched his beard. "Only fella I knew advertising for a bride was old Harold Fisher, but he sold his spread and lit out for Wyoming 2 months ago." Vaughn felt a pit forming in his stomach. "Which means whoever she was coming to meet isn't expecting her anymore. Or," the sheriff added, his voice grim, "never was." Tabitha swayed, looking like she might faint. The world was spinning out from under her, and Vaughn knew he had to do something. He made a decision, right then and there. "Miss James, it's getting late," he said, his voice firm but kind. "Why don't you come to my store? My sister, Martha, lives with me above the Mercantile. We have a spare room. You can stay with us until we figure this out." The relief that washed over her face was like a sunrise. That's very kind, Mr. Thornton. I can pay." "We'll worry about that later," he said. He caught the eye of a boy loitering nearby. "Jimmy, carry this trunk to my place." As they walked down the main street, Vaughn was hyper-aware of the woman beside him. She was a complete mystery, a ship without a rudder. But there was a strength in her, a dignity that her confusion couldn't erase. That old protective instinct, the one he thought he'd buried after the war, was roaring back to life. Martha Thornton was on the porch, broom in hand, when they arrived. She had her brother's dark hair and steady eyes, a practical woman who didn't have time for nonsense. "Vaughn, who's this?" He explained the situation quickly. The amnesia, the non-existent groom. Martha listened, her expression unreadable. Then her practical side won out. "Well, she'll stay with us, of course," she said, leaning the broom against the wall. "I could use the company. Come inside, dear. You look like you've been through a storm." The Mercantile was Vaughn's pride. Neat, well-stocked, the heart of the small town. A staircase at the back led to their home. Martha showed Tabitha to a small, clean room, a safe harbor in her sea of confusion. "Supper in an hour," Martha told her. "Get some rest." Alone, Tabitha sank onto the bed. The room felt like it was tilting. She closed her eyes and tried to break through the fog in her mind. But all she got were broken images, a busy street in a city she didn't know. A man's voice, cold and sharp as broken glass. The lurching of the stagecoach. And a feeling, a desperate, clawing feeling of hope. Hope for what? She couldn't remember. Who had sent for her? And why had they abandoned her here, in the middle of nowhere, with no memory of who she was? Dinner was a quiet affair, beef stew and cornbread. Martha tried to fill the silence with town gossip, but Vaughn was watchful, studying their guest, trying to piece together the puzzle she presented. "Tomorrow, I'll take you to see Doc Wilson," Vaughn said as they cleared the table. "Maybe he can make sense of this memory business." "And I'll help you unpack," Martha added with a kind smile. "Maybe there's another clue in your things." Tabitha's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how to thank you." "No need," Vaughn said. "In Timber Creek, we look after our own." "But I'm not one of your own," she whispered, her voice fragile. Vaughn met her gaze across the table, his own eyes serious. "You are now, Miss James," he said. "At least until we figure this out." That night sleep wouldn't come for Tabitha. She listened to the old building groan and settle around her. She touched the small locket at her throat, the only thing she wore that felt like it truly belonged to her. She opened it. Inside there was no picture, just a tiny perfect curl of dark hair. Whose, she had no idea. The next morning, Vaughn took her to Doc Wilson. The old doctor was kind, his hands gentle as he examined her. He listened to her fragmented story, his brow furrowed in concentration. "No head injury you can recall. No recent illness." "None that I can remember, doctor." He sighed. "Memory is a tricky thing. It can be a physical blow that shakes it loose, or a shock to the soul. Sometimes the mind hides things to protect itself, things we're not ready to face." "Will it ever come back?" Tabitha asked, her voice trembling. "It might," he said, patting her hand. "Sometimes a smell, a sound, a familiar face can unlock the door. Just be patient, my dear. Be patient with yourself." As they left the doctor's office, the words echoed in Vaughn's mind. Things we're not ready to face. What had happened to this woman that was so terrible, her mind had decided to erase it. He took her on a walk through town, hoping something would spark a memory. The church, the schoolhouse, the hotel. Nothing. Her eyes remained vacant, searching for a landmark in a land that was completely foreign to her. At the telegraph office, Vaughn sent wires to Denver and the surrounding towns. He asked about any rancher who might have been looking for a mail-order bride. He described Tabitha, hoping someone, somewhere, was missing her. The operator told him it could be days before he heard anything back. Days. It felt like a lifetime. In the meantime, Tabitha refused to be idle. She insisted on helping at the mercantile. To Martha's surprise, she was a natural. Her handwriting was neat, her mind sharp with figures. "You've had an education," Martha remarked one afternoon, as Tabitha balanced the ledger perfectly. "It seems so," Tabitha said, a small, sad smile on her face. It was another piece of herself she couldn't connect to. A skill without a history. The days settled into a strange routine. They'd work in the store, and in the evenings, Vaughn would read aloud while Martha and Tabitha sewed. It was peaceful. Too peaceful. Vaughn could feel the tension humming just beneath the surface. They were all waiting for the other shoe to drop. It dropped on a Thursday. Tabitha was arranging a new shipment of ribbons, her fingers nimble and sure. The bell above the door jangled, announcing a customer. A man filled the doorway. He was tall, bearded, his clothes covered in the dust of the range. His spurs clinked on the wooden floorboards, a sound like a rattlesnake's warning. "Afternoon, Victor," Vaughn said from behind the counter, his voice neutral. The man, Victor, nodded. "Supply run." His eyes swept the store, dismissive and cold. And then they landed on Tabitha. He froze. The color drained from his face. His jaw went slack. He stared at her, not with curiosity, but with a raw, undisguised shock that bordered on horror. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. Tabitha felt a chill crawl up her spine. She didn't know this man, but a part of her, a deep, buried part, screamed that she did. Vaughn saw the look on Victor Layton's face, and his hand instinctively moved below the counter, closer to the shotgun he kept there. Something was very, very wrong. "This is Miss Tabitha James," Vaughn said, his voice a low warning. "She's helping us out for a spell. Miss James, this is Victor Layton. He owns the Double L Ranch, north of town." Layton snatched his hat off his head, his movements jerky. His sandy hair was streaked with gray, but his eyes were sharp and furious. "Miss James," he said, the name sounding like a curse on his tongue. "Welcome to Timber Creek." Vaughn stepped out from behind the counter, placing himself subtly between the rancher and Tabitha. "You two know each other?" "No," Tabitha said immediately. But at the same time, Victor said, "We might have seen each other in Denver." A lie. Vaughn knew it was a lie. He could smell it. "Is that right? Miss James just arrived on Tuesday's stage, as a mail-order bride, it seems." He watched Victor's face, looking for a reaction. He got one. Victor's expression darkened into a thundercloud. "Is that what she told you?" The question was aimed at Vaughn, but his eyes were burning a hole through Tabitha. She found her voice, shaky but determined. "Mr. Layton, do you know me? If you know anything at all, please." "I'm afraid I don't," he snapped, his voice cold and final. "You just remind me of someone." He turned his back on her, dismissing her completely. "Thornton, I need flour, coffee, and a box of 44 cartridges. Can we get on with it?" The air in the store was so thick you could have cut it with a knife. Vaughn filled the order, his movements deliberate and slow. He watched every move Victor made. Tabitha, pale and shaken, retreated to the back room. She was certain he was lying. She had seen it in his eyes. Recognition. And something else. Fear. When the bell above the door finally announced Victor's departure, Vaughn found her in the storeroom, her hands trembling as she tried to stack tins of peaches. "Are you all right?" She nodded, but she wouldn't look at him. "He knows me, Mr. Thornton. I am sure of it." "I thought so too," Vaughn said, leaning against the door frame. "Victor Layton. He's been here about 3 years, keeps to himself, paid cash for his land, which always struck me as odd. But I've never heard a whisper about him looking for a wife." "Maybe I'm wrong," she said, but her voice was hollow. She didn't believe it for a second. That night, after Martha had gone to visit a neighbor, Vaughn found Tabitha on the small balcony above the street. The sun was setting, bleeding crimson and gold across the mountains. "Tell me what you do remember," he said softly, sitting in the chair beside her. "Even the smallest thing." She closed her eyes. A house with green shutters, a garden full of roses, a woman's voice singing a lullaby. She opened her eyes and they were filled with a deep sadness. "But I don't know if they're my memories or something I read in a book. What about the boarding house in Denver?" The name came to her suddenly, out of the fog. "Mrs. Sullivan's boarding house for respectable ladies, on Larimer Street." Vaughn leaned forward. "That's good. That's something solid. And before that?" She shook her head. "Nothing. Just shadows." He studied her face in the twilight. "This mail-order bride arrangement, it feels wrong. Most folks write back and forth for months. They exchange photographs. A man doesn't just summon a woman he's never met with a 2-sentence note. Do you think I was tricked?" The question hung in the air between them, a terrifying possibility. "I think something is going on that we don't understand," he said carefully. "And I think Victor Layton is part of it." They sat in silence for a while, the stars beginning to pop out in the velvet sky. "What will you do?" Vaughn asked, his voice low. "If your memory never comes back?" The question blindsided her. I haven't let myself think about it." "You could stay," he said, his voice so quiet she almost didn't hear it. "Here, in Timber Creek, Martha likes having you around, and you're good for the business." A strange warmth bloomed in her chest. "That's very kind of you." "It's not kindness," he said, turning to look at her. His face was in shadow, but she could feel the intensity of his gaze. "You fit here, Tabitha." He used her first name, and it sent a shiver through her. "It's like you were meant to be here, even if the reason you came was a lie." The next morning, the first piece of the puzzle arrived by telegraph. Sheriff Parker brought the message to the store himself. "Got a reply from Denver," he announced. "Spoke to a Mrs. Sullivan. She confirms that Tabitha James was a guest for 3 weeks, kept to herself, paid her bill, said she was on her way to Timber Creek to meet her fiancé." "Did she say where she came from before Denver?" Vaughn asked. "Said her references were from back east. Boston, she thought." "Boston," Tabitha whispered. The name sparked something, a flash of cobblestone streets, the smell of salt on the air. But it was gone as quickly as it came. "There's more," the sheriff said, his expression serious. "The day after she left, a man came looking for her. A tall fella, well-dressed, with a beard. Mrs. Sullivan said he was real upset he'd missed her." Vaughn and Tabitha looked at each other. "Victor Layton. It had to be." "Did she get a name?" Vaughn asked. "Nope, but she said he didn't seem like a friend." After the sheriff left, Vaughn locked the mercantile door. It was the middle of the day. "Martha," he said, his voice grim, "we're going for a ride to the Double L Ranch." Martha's eyes widened. "You think Victor Layton is the man who was looking for her?" "His reaction in the store yesterday," Vaughn said, his jaw tight. "And the description. It's too much to be a coincidence. He turned white as a ghost when he saw her. We need to know why." They set out the next morning. The ride to the Double L was long and dusty. The landscape grew more rugged, more isolated. "Victor's got good land," Vaughn explained as they traveled. "Good water. He's a smart rancher, but he's not a friendly man. He keeps his business his own." The ranch came into view around a bend. It was a proper spread. A big main house, a bunkhouse, a sturdy barn. As their wagon approached, cowboys stopped their work to watch them, their faces hard and suspicious. Victor Layton himself emerged from the barn. When he saw them, his face hardened into a mask of cold fury. "Thornton," he said, his voice dripping with ice. "This is a surprise." "Just being neighborly," Vaughn said, swinging down from the wagon and helping the women down. "Thought Miss James could use some country air." Victor's eyes locked on Tabitha. If looks could kill, she'd have been dead on the spot. "I'm branding today. It's not a good time for a social call." "We won't be long," Vaughn said, his hand resting casually on the Colt at his hip. A Mexican woman, the housekeeper, appeared at the door. "Señor Victor, guests." Victor looked trapped. Frontier hospitality demanded he invite them in, but it was the last thing in the world he wanted to do. "Coffee," he growled. "In the house, Elena." The inside of the house was a surprise. It was refined. Good furniture, shelves full of books, paintings on the walls. This wasn't the home of a simple rancher. This was the home of a man with money and taste, a man with a past. "You have a lovely home, Mr. Layton," Tabitha said, her voice quiet. "Thank you," he replied stiffly. He watched her like a hawk, tracking her every move. Martha tried to make small talk about cattle prices, but the tension was suffocating. Vaughn wandered the room, his eyes missing nothing. Tabitha felt herself drawn to a writing desk in the corner. And that's when she saw it. A small, silver-framed photograph. a formal portrait of a young woman. Tabitha's heart began to hammer against her ribs. She reached out, her hand shaking, and picked it up. The woman in the photograph had her eyes, her mouth, her face. It was like looking into a strange, distorted mirror. The woman in the picture was colder, harder, her hair styled differently, her dress impossibly elaborate. But it was her. "Put that down," Victor snapped, his voice cracking like a whip. But Tabitha couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. This is me," she whispered. The room went dead silent. Victor's face was a mess of shock and fury. "That's impossible." "No," Tabitha insisted, her voice gaining strength. "It's me, but different." Vaughn was at her side in an instant, taking the photograph from her trembling fingers. The resemblance was undeniable. "Victor," Vaughn demanded, his voice low and dangerous. "Who is this woman?" Victor Layton stared at the photograph. The fight seemed to drain out of him, leaving behind an old, defeated man. He sank into a chair. "Her name," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper, "was Teresa Layton, my wife." The word hit the room like a gunshot. "Wife. She died," Victor said, his eyes empty. "2 years ago." The floor seemed to drop out from under Tabitha. She grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself. A wife. A dead wife who looked exactly like her. None of this made any sense. "I don't understand," she said. "Neither do I," Victor said bitterly. "When you walked into that store, I thought I was seeing a ghost." "Where did you meet your wife?" Vaughn asked, his question sharp as a knife. "Boston," Victor said, and the name hit Tabitha again. "Cobblestones, the smell of the sea. She was the daughter of a business partner. We married. We came west. She didn't like it here." "How did she die?" Martha asked gently. "A fever," Victor answered quickly. Too quickly. "The doctor said it was a fever. She was sick for weeks." Tabitha looked at him. Another lie. She could feel it. She put the photograph down. "Mr. Layton, I have never met you. I don't know why I look like your late wife, but I am not her." "I know that," he snapped. "Teresa is buried on the hill behind this house." Elina, the housekeeper, brought in the coffee, her dark eyes darting between her employer and the strange visitors. The silence stretched on, thick with unspoken questions. "Mr. Layton," Vaughn said finally, "did you place an advertisement for a mail-order bride?" Victor looked genuinely surprised. "No, of course not. Why?" Vaughn handed him the newspaper clipping. Victor studied it, a deep frown on his face. "I've never seen this before." He turned it over. "This is the Boston Chronicle. I haven't seen a Boston paper in years." "Boston again," Martha murmured. The headache that had been buzzing at the edge of Tabitha's mind suddenly exploded into a blinding pain. She pressed her fingers to her temples. Images flooded her mind. A grand house, servants, an old man with a face like stone, and a young woman laughing in a garden, a woman who looked just like the picture on the desk. "I think," she said slowly, her voice strained, "I think I knew your wife." Every eye in the room was on her. "What do you mean?" Victor demanded. "I'm not sure," she stammered, trying to grasp the slippery threads of memory. "But her face, besides looking like me, it's familiar, like I've seen it before. Not in a mirror, in real life." Victor shot to his feet. His chair scraped loudly on the wooden floor. "I think it's time for you to leave." "Victor," Vaughn began. "Get out," he roared. "I don't know what kind of game this is, but I want no part of it. My wife is dead. Leave her in peace." There was nothing else to do. They left, the questions swirling around them, heavier and darker than before. As they drove away, Tabitha looked back. Victor was standing on his porch, a rigid silhouette against the afternoon sun, watching them go. He looked like a man guarding a tomb. Once they were out of sight, Martha finally spoke. "Well, that was a bucket of snakes." "The resemblance," Vaughn said, shaking his head. "It's more than a coincidence." "Do you think they're related?" Martha asked. "Sisters, maybe?" Tabitha didn't have an answer. All she had was a growing sense of dread. They were cresting a small hill, the horses straining, when Tabitha cried out, "Stop, Vaughn! Stop the wagon!" He pulled the team to a halt. "What is it?" She was staring at a small grove of aspen trees by a creek. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a terrifying recognition. "I've been here before," she whispered. Vaughn helped her down. She walked towards the trees like a woman in a trance. "It was raining," she said, her hand touching the smooth white bark of an aspen. "I was cold, and I was so scared." "When was this?" Vaughn asked gently, coming up behind her. "Recently. I think just before I got to town." She moved to the creek and knelt down, her reflection rippling in the clear water. "I was running. My dress was torn. My hands were bleeding." She looked at her own hands, half expecting to see the scratches. Vaughn's eyes, the eyes of a tracker, scanned the area. "If you were on foot, this spot is about halfway between Victor's ranch and Timber Creek." Tabitha's breath hitched. "Yes, I was walking towards town. I was running away from the ranch." Her head started to pound again. "I can't remember why. I can't remember what I was running from." Martha put a comforting arm around her. "Don't force it, dear." "But I have to know," Tabitha cried, her voice filled with anguish. "If I was at that ranch before, if I knew his wife, it's all connected." "We'll figure it out," Vaughn promised, his voice a rock in her storm. But as they rode back to town, a chilling certainty settled over him. Tabitha hadn't just visited the Double L Ranch. She had escaped from it. That night she dreamed. She was running through a storm, mud sucking at her shoes, rain lashing her face. Behind her, a man was shouting her name. An angry, terrifying sound that echoed in the thunder. She woke up in a cold sweat, her heart hammering. She knew one thing with absolute certainty. She had fled the Double L Ranch in terror, and the man chasing her in the dream had Victor Layton's face. The next morning, another telegram arrived. This one was for Vaughn, sent from an old contact of his in Denver. He read it, and his face went grim. He showed it to Martha and Tabitha. "Inquiries about T. James attracting attention. Stop. Boston detective arrived Denver asking questions. Stop. Claims he is searching for missing woman. Stop. Heading your way. Stop. Caution advised." "A detective?" Martha gasped. "Tabitha, are you in some kind of trouble?" "I don't know," Tabitha whispered. "I can't imagine why." Vaughn folded the paper, his mind working furiously. "This could be good. It could be family, looking for you. Or," Martha said, always the pragmatist, "it could be very, very bad. Detectives usually mean the law is involved." The new threat sent a fresh wave of anxiety through Tabitha. What if she wasn't a victim? What if she was a criminal? A woman on the run, her crimes so terrible that her own mind had buried them. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice small. "We wait," Vaughn said, his decision made. "This detective will be here on the next stage. We find out what he wants, but we do it on our terms." Carrying on as normal was impossible. Every jangle of the mercantile bell made Tabitha jump. Every new face was a potential accuser. Vaughn stayed close by her side, a silent guardian. Later that day, Sheriff Parker came by. "Got a wire," he said, chewing on a toothpick. "Boston detective by the name of Hollister is on his way, looking for a missing woman." He looked at Tabitha. Wouldn't be you, by any chance? She swallowed hard. I don't know, Sheriff. The sheriff looked from her to Vaughn, then sighed. He wasn't a complicated man, but he was a decent one. All right, here's what we'll do. When he gets here, I don't want you in plain sight. Let me talk to him first. Get the lay of the land. Vaughn nodded. Good idea. I'll take her to my old cabin. It's a few miles out of town. No one will find her there. I'll stop by after I've had a word with this Hollister, the sheriff said, and with a tip of his hat, he was gone. They moved quickly. Martha packed a bag with food and blankets, while Vaughn saddled 2 horses. As dusk settled over Timber Creek, they slipped out of town, 2 shadows moving against the dying light. The cabin was small and simple, tucked away in a grove of pine trees. It was the first place Vaughn had called home in Colorado, and it felt safe. It felt solid. It's not much, he said, lighting a lantern. It's perfect, she replied, the soft glow chasing away the shadows. He built a fire while she unpacked. The simple domestic act felt strangely comforting. I'll sleep out here by the fire, he said, gesturing to a rough-hewn bench. You take the bedroom. Thank you, Vaughn, she said softly. For everything. You've been so kind to a stranger. He turned from the fire to look at her, his face serious in the flickering light. You don't feel like a stranger, Tabitha. That's the strange part. Their eyes met, and in that moment, she felt a connection to him that was stronger than any memory she'd lost. She looked away, flustered by the warmth spreading through her chest. They ate in silence, the crackling fire the only sound. Whatever happens tomorrow, Vaughn said, his voice low and steady. Whatever this detective has to say, I want you to know you have friends here. Martha and I, we believe in you. Tears welled in her eyes. Even though you don't know who I am, even though I might have done something terrible. He reached across the small space between them and took her hand. His hand was rough, calloused from work, but his touch was incredibly gentle. Then we'll face it together, he promised. That night, lying in the narrow bed that smelled of pine and leather and Vaughn, she felt a sense of safety she couldn't remember ever feeling before. But sleep was a battlefield. Images assaulted her, a grand ballroom, a man's angry face looming over her, the feeling of falling. She woke with a gasp, exhausted but resolute. She would not run anymore. Vaughn was already awake, making coffee over the fire. The sheriff should be here soon, he said. They waited. The morning crawled by. Every snap of a twig, every call of a bird sounded like approaching hoofbeats. Finally, they heard them. 2 riders. Sheriff Parker emerged from the trees first. Behind him was a man who looked utterly out of place. He wore a dark city suit and a bowler hat, his face thin and pinched. He looked at the rustic cabin with disdain. Miss James, the sheriff called out. This is Mr. Hollister, from Boston. He has some questions for you. Tabitha stepped out of the cabin, Vaughn at her side. She felt like a prisoner awaiting her sentence. Hollister dismounted, his movements precise and stiff. He took off his hat, revealing thinning hair combed neatly over a pale scalp. His eyes were like chips of ice. He looked at Tabitha, a long, critical gaze that made her feel like an insect under glass. Miss James, he said, his voice crisp and cold. Or should I say, Miss Thornton? The name hit her like a physical blow, a jolt of electricity. Thornton. It felt right. I beg your pardon, she managed to say. Miss Teresa Thornton, the detective repeated, savoring each word. Of Boston, Massachusetts, daughter of the shipping magnate, Jeremiah Thornton. Vaughn stiffened beside her. Thornton, that's my name. Hollister waved a dismissive hand. A meaningless coincidence. Miss Thornton, you disappeared from your father's house 9 months ago. right after he announced your engagement to a Mr. Philip Hartwell. Teresa. The name echoed in the empty chambers of her mind. A memory sparked, a diamond ring, cold and heavy on her finger. A man she did not love. I don't remember, she whispered. Convenient, Hollister said with a smirk. Your father has posted a substantial reward for your safe return. He is a very powerful man, and he is very anxious to have you back. Vaughn stepped forward. This doesn't make any sense. If she's this Teresa Thornton, why does Victor Layton have a photograph of her that he claims is his dead wife? Hollister's eyebrow shot up. Victor Layton? I don't know that name. The sheriff cleared his throat. Local rancher. Says his wife, Teresa Layton, died 2 years back, and the picture he's got is a dead ringer for this young lady. Interesting, the detective murmured, his sharp eyes glinting. Very interesting indeed. Wait, Tabitha, Teresa said, her head spinning. The pieces were flying at her, too fast to catch. If I am Teresa Thornton, why would I be traveling as Tabitha James? An alias, obviously, Hollister said, as if speaking to a child. A young lady of your station doesn't just run away. She plans. She hides. You're saying she fled an arranged marriage, Vaughn said, his voice tight. It wouldn't be the first time, Hollister replied. He turned his cold gaze back to Teresa. Your father is a forgiving man, Miss Thornton. He is willing to overlook this youthful indiscretion. It is time to come home. Something in his tone, a possessiveness, an arrogance, made her blood run cold. And if I don't want to come home? Hollister's face hardened. That is not an option. Now hold on a minute, Sheriff Parker said, stepping in. She's a grown woman. You can't just drag her back to Boston if she doesn't want to go. I have documents, Hollister said, tapping his breast pocket. Signed by her father, giving me the authority to return her to his custody. That might work back east, Vaughn said, his voice a low growl. But this is Colorado. Out here, a person's will is their own. The air crackled with tension. Teresa felt like she was being torn in two, trapped between a past she couldn't remember and a future she didn't want. Gentlemen, she said, her voice shaking but firm. I need to think. If I am who you say I am, there are still too many questions. Why do I look exactly like a dead woman? Why was I attacked and left for dead? Hollister scowled, but he saw the logic in her words. And he saw the look in Vaughn Thornton's eyes. Very well, he conceded. You have until morning. We will stay at the hotel in town. But tomorrow, Miss Thornton, we begin the journey back to Boston, with or without your cooperation. After they had gone, Teresa sank onto the bench by the fire, her legs unable to hold her. Teresa Thornton, she whispered. It felt like a name from a dream. Vaughn knelt in front of her. Teresa or Tabitha, he said, his voice intense. It doesn't matter. What matters is the truth, and I don't think Hollister is telling all of it. Neither do I, she said. And I think the only place we're going to find it is at the Double L Ranch. It's too dangerous, he said immediately. Victor Layton is the key to all of this, she insisted, her amber eyes blazing with a newfound fire. He tried to kill me once, Vaughn. I won't let him bury my past with his secrets. We have to go back. He looked at her, at the woman who had arrived in his town, a broken mystery, and was now a pillar of strength. He nodded. All right, he said. But we do it my way, and we don't get separated. Not for a second. They didn't wait. They rode out immediately, taking a back trail through the hills to avoid being seen. The sun was low in the sky, casting long, sinister shadows across the land by the time they saw the Double L Ranch in the valley below. They tethered their horses in the trees and approached the ranch on foot, moving like ghosts through the twilight. The place seemed quiet, deserted. "We'll try the main house," Vaughn whispered. "Maybe the housekeeper, Elena, will talk to us." They had just reached the edge of the yard, staying deep in the shadows of the outbuildings, when a scream ripped through the evening air. It came from the barn. Vaughn didn't hesitate. He drew his Colt and sprinted across the open ground, Teresa right behind him. He kicked the barn door open. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of hay and fear. In the dim light, they saw Victor Layton. He had Elena, the housekeeper, pinned against a stall. His hand was clamped over her mouth, and in his other hand he held a long, wicked-looking knife. "Where is it?" he was hissing at her. "The box! I know you took it!" "Victor!" Vaughn shouted. Layton spun around, his eyes wild with panic and rage. He saw Vaughn, and then he saw Teresa. A guttural animal sound escaped his throat. "You!" he spat at her. "You just couldn't stay away, could you?" He shoved Elena to the ground and lunged for a rifle that was leaning against the wall. Vaughn fired a warning shot into the rafters. Splinters rained down. "Don't do it, Layton." But Victor was beyond reason. He brought the rifle up, leveling it at Teresa. "She ruined everything." Vaughn shoved Teresa behind him, shielding her with his body. "It's over, Victor. Put the gun down." "It's not over," he snarled. "Not until she's gone for good." He looked at Teresa, his face a mask of pure hatred. "Did you think I wouldn't recognize you? Did you really think you could fool me?" "I don't know what you're talking about," Teresa cried out from behind Vaughn. Victor let out a harsh, barking laugh. "Don't you, Teresa? Have you forgotten everything? Have you even forgotten your own sister?" The word hung in the dusty air. Sister. It was like a key turning in a rusty lock. A door in her mind creaked open. An image flooded her memory, a woman's face. A face that was so much like her own, but older, sadder. The same amber eyes, filled with tears. A whispered goodbye in the middle of the night. A secret elopement. "Clara," Teresa whispered, the name a ghost on her lips. "My sister, Clara." Vaughn stared at Victor, the pieces clicking into place with sickening speed. "Teresa Layton, your wife, was Clara Thornton." Victor's rifle didn't waver. "My wife was everything her family wasn't. She was warm, she was kind, until she came out here, this place. It poisoned her." The memories were coming back in a torrent now. Secret letters passed through a trusted servant. Clara, happy at first. Then the letters changing. Fear creeping into the elegant script. Victor's temper, his jealousy, his fists. "You told everyone she died of a fever," Teresa said, her voice shaking with rage. "You lied. What did you do to her, Victor? What did you do to my sister?" "She was leaving me," he roared, spittle flying from his lips. "After I gave her everything, she was going to run back to your father, back to his money." "She was running from you," Teresa screamed, "because you were a monster." "We argued," he said, his voice dropping, becoming chillingly calm. "She fell. She hit her head on the fireplace hearth. It was an accident." A lie, the biggest lie of all. Teresa could see it now, the final desperate letter from Clara. "He says if I leave, he'll kill me. I don't think he's bluffing. I have to get away. Forgive me." "You murdered her," Vaughn said, his voice flat and cold. "It was an accident," Victor insisted, his eyes darting back and forth. "But your father, he would have seen me hang." "So you buried her on the hill and told everyone she was taken by a fever," Teresa said, stepping out from behind Vaughn. She was no longer afraid. She was filled with a white-hot fury. "And then I came looking for her. I came to Timber Creek asking questions." Victor's face twisted. "I recognized you the second I saw you. Her ghost, come back to haunt me. I followed you to Denver. I arranged for you to be brought back here, told you I had news of your sister, and when I got you here..." He shrugged, a casual, horrifying gesture. "I hit you, harder than I meant to. I left you out in the storm. I thought the wilderness would take care of you. But you're stubborn, just like she was." "The mail order bride clipping?" Vaughn asked. Victor sneered. "A little piece of misdirection. Something to keep you confused if you survived. Something to send you chasing ghosts while I covered my tracks." From the shadows behind the stalls, Elena scrambled up. In her hands was a small, ornate wooden box. "He lies!" she cried, her voice ringing with conviction. "She was leaving. She gave me this, for safekeeping. She said if anything happened to her, I was to send it to her sister." She opened the box. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, were letters, dozens of them. Clara's handwriting, and a diary. "That's mine!" Victor screamed, and he lunged for the box. In that split second of distraction, Vaughn moved. He tackled Victor, sending them both crashing into the hay. The rifle went off, the shot deafening in the enclosed space. Teresa ran to Elena, grabbing the box. She had to protect it. It was the only thing left of her sister. Vaughn and Victor were a tangle of limbs, grunting and cursing. Vaughn was strong, but Victor was fighting with the strength of a cornered animal. He landed a vicious punch to Vaughn's jaw, sending him reeling back. Victor scrambled for the rifle. But just as his fingers closed around the stock, the barn doors burst open. Sheriff Parker stood there, silhouetted against the evening sky, his revolver drawn and steady. "Drop it, Layton. It's over." Behind him stood the Boston detective, Hollister, his smug expression replaced by one of pure shock. Victor looked from the sheriff to Vaughn, then to Teresa, who stood clutching the box of letters, her eyes blazing with righteous fury. He was trapped. For a second, a look of utter madness crossed his face. He started to raise the rifle. Another shot rang out, not from the sheriff, from Vaughn. He had recovered, drawn his Colt, and fired. The bullet ripped through Victor's shoulder, sending the rifle clattering to the floor. Victor screamed and collapsed, clutching his ruined arm. It was over. As the sheriff slapped irons on a whimpering Victor Layton, Teresa rushed to Vaughn's side. He was bleeding from a cut on his temple, but he was steady on his feet. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her tight as the tremors she'd been fighting finally took over her body. "It's over," he murmured into her hair. "You're safe." Hollister approached them, looking pale and shaken. "Miss Thornton, I had no idea. Your father never mentioned a sister." "He wouldn't have," Teresa said, her voice muffled against Vaughn's chest. "To him, Clara ceased to exist the day she ran away with that monster." Will you be returning to Boston now?" the detective asked. Teresa pulled back and looked up at Vaughn, at his kind, strong face, at the man who had protected her, trusted her, and believed in her when she didn't even know her own name. She thought of the cold, loveless life waiting for her in Boston, the domineering father, the unwanted fiancé. Then she looked around at the dusty little town of Timber Creek, at Martha, who was now rushing towards them, her face a mixture of fear and relief, at the sheriff, who had done the right thing, at Vaughn. "No," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I don't think so. I think my future is here." The days that followed were a blur of coming to terms with the past. The diary and letters in Clara's box told the whole, heartbreaking story of Victor's abuse and her tragic death. With Elina's testimony, the case against him was sealed. He was taken to Denver to await trial for murder. He would hang. Teresa sent a long letter to her father with Detective Hollister. She told him everything. She told him about Clara and about her own decision to stay in Colorado. She did not ask for his blessing. She was no longer the timid girl who lived in his shadow. She was Tabitha now. She chose the name, a name that had been given to her by chance, but now felt more real than the one she'd been born with. It was the name of the woman who had survived. She moved back into the little room above the mercantile, but it wasn't long before her things started migrating into Vaughn's life, and his into hers. They worked side by side in the store, their partnership easy and natural. The town, now knowing her full story, wrapped its arms around her, accepting her as one of their own. One evening, as the first chill of autumn was in the air, Vaughn took her for a walk down by the creek. The aspen leaves were turning to gold, shimmering in the last light of day. He stopped on the small wooden bridge and took both of her hands in his. "Tabitha," he began, his voice serious, "these past few weeks, they've been the craziest, most dangerous, and happiest weeks of my life." Her heart started to beat a little faster. "Mine too, Vaughn." "I know this is fast," he said, his gaze intense. "And I know you've been through more than any person should have to endure. But I have to ask, I can't imagine this town, this life, without you in it." He took a deep breath. "Tabitha, Teresa, whoever you want to be, will you marry me?" Joy, pure and simple, bubbled up inside her, washing away the last of the shadows. "I would consider it very seriously, Mr. Thornton," she said, a playful smile on her lips. "Is that a yes?" he asked, a hopeful grin spreading across his face. "That," she said, stepping into his arms, "is definitely a yes." His kiss was everything she had been missing her whole life. It was safety and passion, kindness and strength. It was home. They were married in the little church as the leaves fell, the entire town there to celebrate. Sheriff Parker gave the bride away. Martha was her maid of honor. Her father didn't come, but he sent an astonishingly large sum of money as a wedding gift, with a short, clipped note of regret for not believing her about Clara. It was a start. Life in Timber Creek was good. The mercantile thrived. They had a daughter, with her mother's amber eyes, and they named her Clara. Then a son, with Vaughn's steady gaze. On their 5th anniversary, Vaughn gave her a deed, the deed to the old Double L ranch, which he'd bought at auction. "I thought we could build a new house here," he said, as they stood on a hill overlooking the valley. "Not on the old foundation, but up here, where we can see the mountains." She leaned her head on his shoulder, her hand resting on the swell of their third child. "It's time this land had some happy memories," she said. He wrapped his arm around her. "We've come a long way from the confused woman who stepped off that stagecoach." "With no memory and a fake advertisement for a husband," she added, smiling. "You know," he said, his voice soft, "I think I knew, even then, the moment I saw you. You were a mystery I had to solve." "And now?" she asked. "Now," he said, kissing her temple, "you're the adventure that I get to live every single day." The mystery of Teresa Thornton had ended in tragedy and justice. But the story of Tabitha Thornton was just beginning, born from a lie, forged in fire, and destined for a love as vast and enduring as the Colorado sky itself. If you enjoyed this story of a woman who lost her memory only to find her true self, don't forget to like and subscribe. You never know what secrets are waiting to be uncovered in the next strange tale.